Hey guys, today this is going to be my first ever analysis video, and we're going to be highlighting Karmine Corp and their incredibly poor, at least for their standards, right? Second split in the RLCS 2024 season. Obviously the first split, they did what was quite unthinkable for a lot of teams up until Vitality last season, where they won all three events online. And they had an alright major. It wasn't great. Obviously, K Corp, they have this absolutely unreal standard that they have to be at, where they go 3-1 in the Swiss. They lose to Falcons in Game 5. They barely scrape by. Quite a poor complexity, in my opinion. And they're able to handily take down Gen G in the Swiss, so they're 4th seed. They barely scrape by Falcons, which I know a lot of people have Falcons incredibly highly. I think there's quite a few weaknesses to their game. I think it was actually a really good matchup for K Corp, even though they lost them in the Swiss. And then they bowed out to Gentlemates Alpine, who then went on to win the major in 7 games, which they were up 3-2 this series as well, and they threw it away. Their first split online, obviously, you can't do much better. I think their major left a little bit to be desired, at least in their standards, which I know is a bit of a controversial take. It felt very similar to the first split of last season in Rotterdam, where they underperformed, losing to Moist, and then they went on to win the next one. Obviously, it is quite literally impossible for them to win the next one here. We're going to be doing a video here where we're just going to talk over where I think it's kind of gone wrong, at least from my coaching perspective and what I know about the game and what I can see looking into this team. First things first, I'm not really going to try and infer anything about their mentality that isn't just completely basic, because I mean, realistically, I don't know if there's team environment problems, I don't know if there's scrim problems, I don't know any of that stuff. I can only see what's given to me on tournament day. So starting with the first regional, it honestly starts really well. They 3-1 George, they 3-1 Oxygen, they 3-1 Gentleman's Alpine. And 9-3 in games is absolutely a ridiculous start, but where they do obviously struggle is this is the first time they've been put under pressure in a regional. They go out 4-2 to Oxygen, and we're going to be reviewing a little bit of that series of where I see the flaws with KC and where I think teams may look to take advantage of them. And obviously with every playstyle, there's things that are give and take of, okay, mechanically, if they're on this day, this may be a positive. Mechanically, if you're off this day, this can create a huge negative. And one thing with the European playstyle, but mainly K Corp, you see it with more than anyone compared to even Vitality, BDS, and Gentlemates, is how aggressive they push. And when you're playing well individually, it's probably the best style ever. And when you're not playing well, it creates these huge gaps and huge awkward spaces that puts them in really bad spots. So first things first, before we even get into the replays, because we're going to go over everything, we're going to go through what I personally see as their playstyle. If they're going to tell me I'm wrong, that's fine. This is just what I've noticed. So we'll go to draw board, as we always do, because this is the best site ever. The number one thing about K Corp that we have to take note of is how high they push their second man. They almost play as if it's like a 2-1, and this guy gets put in a lot of really awkward gaps. The positive is, if these guys are making space happen and they're being very direct and they're able to force this ball back, these guys are going to be able to rotate out and get these mid boosts and stuff back in. Players like Rise especially is going to absolutely flourish in this area of the field. Why? Because he wants to steal these boosts, he wants to sweep through for demos, he wants to be an option for outlet passes, he wants to basically just be as annoying as possible, and obviously it works really well for him. I think he was probably, these qualities are probably the main reason why BDS did so well last Worlds as well, which is super important. And Vatira, you can have 1,000 words about Vatira, right? But he is the best third man in Rocket League. He's the best in the world at buying time. He's the best at getting his team over the line, in my opinion, where he can just hard carry a game, a series, anything he wants. But the issue comes, in my opinion, when you have Rise and Atau in these spots. They're less likely to get the perfect quality touch to buy time. Their style of play is incredibly reliant on big boosts because of how aggressive they play. And also, I think the big thing that kind of can play on their style's downfall is they're incredibly reliant on players being in form. And I don't think Vatira's been in form to the level he has been in other series and other splits, but it's not permanent. right? And everyone's going to power rank this team, and they're going to be incredibly underrated coming into Worlds, in my opinion. But Vatira is the best player in the world. Maybe Zen, but Vatira is the best player in the world. If anyone can recover, it's him. The issue with how aggressively they play this is when you play this aggressively, you'll start to notice one thing even just looking. And that's, if this guy gets put in a bad spot, that it's very likely these guys can play in these half spaces. Where, okay, if Rise is sitting top of the box, Atau's making a play, and Vatira's here. But more importantly, when I could probably say when Rise is on the ball, Atau is here, or even Vatira is here, where he's just basically waiting for a pass. Atau's third, and Rise is on the ball. That's when they probably look the weakest, just based on quality and traits. But it's more likely that this guy gets starved out because of how boost reliant they are. And you start to see these little missed touches, and all that turns into is they have to give up this entire space in midfield. Because if you're going to send your second man as aggressively as this, where does space open up? Space opens up behind the second, in between the third and the second. These are the gaps you play in. And hopefully Evan blocks that up. And this guy's in a situation where he's either forced to dive or he's forced to bail out. And it makes it really easy to pass through their defense. The other thing is because of how aggressively they play this, they tend to just throw themselves at the ball really, really hype, really aggressively in midfield, which then also creates huge gaps that teams are able to play into and start looking for. One thing we'll notice in this Oxygen series, and how I think teams kind of will play against them in general, is Oxygen are just in love with a play style where, yeah, they can have two back, but let's say Oxygen is the blue team. They adore just ripping the ball long and trying to find this outlet. And you can start to see if one player's here, we'll say one player's recovering, one player's throwing themselves at the ball, and one player's third. If KC is the orange team, right? KC, Oxygen, and we'll see this in a few examples. This is really awkward for the third, and there's a lot of this awkward space where if they can't cut the pass because they've starved themselves out, it's just a goal against. So let's get into the replays. Let's look at it a little bit more. And this is just for Regional 1. Then we'll get into Regional 2. And we'll get into Regional 3 where they are starting to pick up form again. I'm recording this on this Saturday. So they just made top 4 after beating Oxygen, actually, probably to keep their Worlds hopes alive. If they lost that, they could be out of Worlds. This, I think they'll hold on to the World spot. So let's get into it. We're going to watch a couple spells of play. This is just trying to highlight their hyper quick offense, their super aggressive demos and positioning, and the kind of the awkwardness they put their third in. Doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing. This is where their reliance on boost comes in super massive. If Rise doesn't get this boost here, and he has to bail out, more than likely, in my opinion, Sekou could get a touch here, Itachi could get a touch here, and it leaves him in that huge gap we were talking about. But also something like this. If Sekou drops this ball, the amount of space that Itachi has on this left side of the field, Rise is starved, Atau starved, Vatira's on like 40, right? So we can see that. And it just creates this huge gap of space that realistically Itachi's in a 1v1. So that's the first time we've seen it. Vatira instantly dives once again. If Sekou plays a beat here and just gets this ball middle, it's a goal. 100% in my opinion. Rise has starved himself out because of their rotation on big boost. He has to go for the corner boost. Atau's going to be late diving for Juicy. It's going to be a 1v1 situation where either Atau has to dive or Atau has to go in the space. And if he gives the space, he probably scores. If he dives, he should be able to get the beat or a double. Maybe they get a lucky save, but in general, they should execute there. Same thing here. If Juicy trusts a little bit more, this ball should be going right, and they should be able to get it clear here. So that's already 3 times in 10 seconds, where it's just taking note of it. This is part of, yeah, they are so aggressive, and it works sometimes, but they have to be really, really quality with their execution. What they were doing so well the first split was every time they had executions like this, they pretty much had an air dribble bump to follow it. And also I think they were getting a little bit wider, and most teams rotate near post anyway, so if you're able to switch it and get it wide, it's always going to work out slightly better. Sekou's rotation isn't the best here. Once again, another panic touch from Itachi. If he controls it and throws it right there on the counter. So just switching the field really, really puts these guys in a bad spot. You see the aggressiveness once again. If Juicy flips, they score. Like, the thing with K-Corp is their ideology, at least from what I can see, is so hyper aggressive that it relies on execution, and it's kind of a fair assessment from whether it be Farah or the entire team that they're just going to be able to execute better 95% of the time, because in form it's probably one of the most dominant teams we've seen. But when they're out of form, which I said it before, I think Vatir is slightly out of form right now, they don't execute as well, and they just get put in bad spots. Same thing here. Maybe not this one as much. This one's probably a bit of a stretch from me, just to kind of show an example. But if Juicy doesn't flip here and it drops to Sekou, they score. Another free ball. Rice actually does really well fake challenging here. I think Atau just gets caught too far forward. And then this is the awkward gaps that the third gets put in. Because often when you beat their first man, you're also beating their second. If you can stick on the ball, Vatir just gets put in a terrible place. And it doesn't go in. So, I say all that, but the ball didn't go in. So, maybe I'm a bit delusional, and that's fine. So then we have another counter-attack play where, like, I don't want to pause it here. Realistically, if Juicy trusts this ball at all, Itachi makes one touch to Juicy. He probably gets a beat here because Atau's in that same spot that we talk about a lot, where he either has to dive or he has to give up the space. And it gives up a huge, huge counter-attack opportunity. Whether they score or not is a different question. But it's this idea, if you keep giving up attacks like this, teams are going to score on you. And they're going to score consistently on you. Same thing here. Like, I get the logic of, okay, we should score on this attack. If Vatira goes middle here, they probably do score on this attack. Or if Vatira is just playing slightly better, he probably just scores. But he doesn't get the shot high enough. It's not well enough placed. Rise over commits. And you can start to see how teams can just absolutely hit them on counterattacks because they use all their boost on attacks. And you know when it works. It works when they execute. So it's kind of irrelevant. This play, I'm not going to kill him for. It's the same play, but you're also down a goal with 15 seconds left. Same thing here with the third minute. Terrible spot. He's forced to dive, leads to an open net. So, it is what it is a little bit. It's not a big deal. So that's the first thing I notice with their attack and the space they give up on counters. We'll then go to where I'm seeing as a positive with their off-ball being incredibly good, but I think it's fallen off a little bit more this split than anything. So, it's actually the first goal they scored this game, and then we'll look at one goal against Oxygen in the quarterfinal that they scored. But part of what made this team so frustrating to play was how aggressively they demoed. And they are very, very good at this when they have boosts, where Atau pushes out. Oh, they don't execute. They're instantly looking for demos. They're instantly looking for space creation. And one thing I will say is, I did just make a video on this of how this improves players at every rank. So go check that out. Link will be down below. But it's so quality. And you really have to give KC credit for that. We'll go to Game 5 as well, because there's a goal in this. Where it's not a goal. I think it's a goal. But it is Vatira actually creating a chance. They don't score off this. And obviously, all the trends you'll see, if I only looked at goals, well, I wouldn't be a very good coach in my eyes. But that's my opinion. Instantly looking for demo 1, demo 1 2. All he did was create the space. And that's all that you can ask for sometimes. Where, if Rice controls this, maybe they get a little bit more effective of play. But it all goes back to what I'm saying is this team just was not executing at the level that I think they should be. And to be honest, that they probably think they should be. I do want to look at one other thing that I talked about before, where I was talking about their second and third men and how they execute, where I don't think it's the highest quality. And this, to be honest, is probably their weakest part of their game plan that I notice, and it's how much they send as second and third men. Because the more and more teams pick up on it, they'll just play beats against this team. So we'll look at this game that we've already kind of looked at part of the game, but I think it's good to show trends in games more than anything. Where a play like this is where I talk about how aggressively they dive a second. Itachi's not really a threat on this ball, in my honest opinion. Like, this doesn't require an instant dive. I think this should be a fine 50, but then Rise instant challenging in this, like, it's not that they're bad individually, it's the bad part of Vatira is starved out, Atau is starved out. If you get a clean beat on this team, it's a 3-on-1. I don't know how they don't execute here. So I think it's more so just teams need to learn this pattern of this should be a goal every time against KC. KC should not get away with a play like this. That also happens here a couple of seconds later, where you can even say, arguably, Rise does it there. Rise insta dives again. Space opens up. How many times have I said about this where once you pass out against this team, I think you'll have all the space in the world if you're able to switch sides. A slightly better pass. Itachi instantly bangs this to Juicy and they get a goal off it. Even still, the insta dive then creates the space where Juicy's able to get a beat. Probably should score off that, or at least get a chance off it. They do get a good recovery, but you see the obvious gaps that are cracking with KC. I do think they look a lot more disciplined in Regional 3, and I'm really excited to go over that with you guys. But it doesn't mean questions can't be asked. Same thing here. I personally, I just don't think Attel is doing anything throwing a hand up here. It puts him in such an easy space to get beat, where Vatira is now in a situation where he either has to go or can't. And they should execute here majority of the time. Juicy has thrown away 2 goals this game alone. That I would say a player of his quality, especially a major winner now, should be executing, I don't know, 50, 75% of the time, but leave those both go begging. They get away with it because they won the game. But that's where, okay, if Kate or General Mates or Vitality or Luna Galaxy are playing slightly better, they just win. And it's not really close because the amount of space they're giving up. So I do want to look at it in this game because they actually score 2 goals off it. It's how they win this game, and this is how they go ahead 3-2 in the series. They get a foothold on the series, and then they do go on to win it, which everyone's like, oh my gosh, like how did Oxygen win? Oxygen executed. And especially when you have a player like Joya, where, first of all, this is really, really quality from Oski to then chase the third, force him in a really bad spot. You see the gaps open up with the third, where Joya's even able to take the ball down and get into a 1v1, and then they start to get the outplay. Leads to a goal, which obviously a brilliant outplay from Joya. But when you leave that much space against these talented players, this is what happens, and this is why they score goals. So it also happens here, where Rise just doesn't need a pre-jump. Like it, obviously I'm looking at it where I have everyone's boost amount. This is just so, like you can tell Oski's not getting a good touch here. I think he's playing as if Oski is 100 boost, which, you know, under pressure I can understand it a little bit more. But I don't know. I think this is such a very, very risky dive that puts him in such a bad spot that now Vatira has to get the perfect touch, and he doesn't. And this is where I say it relies heavily on third man getting these great touches. They don't get the touch. Archie takes his 50, leads to a goal. And this was kind of the blueprint that we even saw into Regional 2 qualifiers, and we'll get into that now. So we are back on Liquipedia, and then this is where it all went wrong. And it's quite bad, right? Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is terrible from Karmine Corp. They don't make the regional. They lose to 3-1 in uppers. Not a great series. They drop to lowers, then losing game 5 to top Cougars, which it's 2 good teams, right? Cell is not a bad team. Mike Boy, Tekos, Rizex. Tekos, super high potential. Mike Boy and Rizex have been consistent top 8, top 12 players. And top Cougars, where are they? They are right there, actually. CMAS, super good, young, upcoming player. He'll have a really high ceiling. Same with Acro and Wave, always consistently in regionals. I think they missed 2 this season, and it always just feels a bit wrong when Wave isn't in a regional, in my opinion. But it's not teams that you go, oh yeah, KC should lose to them, right? But it is Europe, everyone loses. This is when the problems got highlighted the most. Let's hop into the replays and let's analyze. So guys, now we're into the replays for the qualifier. We're going to be kind of quickly going over it, just 1 or 2 goals per game in each series, so I'll try not to daddle on it a bit too long. The replays are no ball chasing, so if we have to watch Varun Kometo's stream, we'll have this and this video's link in the description down below. So first of all, really, really aggressive challenge from Rise. That this is where I say it's so easy to play through space when they're nervous or when they're not playing well. where that ball is not threatening. And that early commit puts them in such a bad spot that then they get scored on. We're going to go straight into game 2, where even when things went right, it wasn't going right. Or like even something like this where you don't see these types of mistakes on execution. Atao 0 boost. They starved each other out. You can see in the top right as well where my pen is. There's just a very, very low boost. It's one player with boost, and it's usually the player last back or hasn't got back in time. And it puts their third man in such awful positions. And we're just slightly clicking through this because obviously I don't have the timestamps that I want. But it's just poor from KC. And we have an ad. Okay, so now we're at the second goal. And basically what actually did go right with KC is that if they're this aggressive, you think it'll pay off in the long run eventually if you're this talented. Well, look with how they get put in a really bad spot with their third man here. You see how high their line is. Everyone's up forward. This is what I mean. Atao is more likely to make these mistakes than anyone. With these poor touches, then another poor touch out of defense leads to a goal. And it all comes from the fact they starve each other out on offense. And then 2 really, really poor touches from Atao. And teams are just able to capitalize instantly on counterattacks. And it puts KC in a spot where if they don't score, it's more than likely or not they're conceding. Part of why it wasn't happening the first split, 2 reasons. 1, they were executing well, which that's all you have to say. If you're executing well, you're executing well, right? Fair play. Everything I say goes out the window if you just score, right? And that's what is kind of like, well, I just need to shut up. If Vatira scores, Vatira scores. If Rise gets the bump, Rise gets the bump. But what happens here, where Vatira is throwing the ball in the corner, heavy touch, and Atao's just throwing himself out of the play, and it's leading to an open net, well, then everything I say kind of makes a little bit more sense, where if they're not executing, this is what happens. And also, let's be very clear. They lost a little bit of their aura. Teams are not as scared playing KC now that they've slipped up. If KC were still slipping up, that's when it would be like, ooh. Or if teams weren't slipping up against KC, we would be like, ooh, like you expect them to execute. No one is expecting them to execute to the level they were. And that is terrifying if you're a team that pretty much fully relies on confidence. So now we're into the top Cougar series. We'll see how this goes a little bit. Obviously just as chaotic. It's not, you know, the final result, but it's these little things of like, a second just loses the ball for free, third gets put in no man's land. Atao super panicky on defense, pre-jumps it when realistically, like, you can tell if a player's awkward. Acro was awkward, right? Like, it wasn't necessary on things like that. And these games just became a shootout, and I know a lot of people then went on to say, oh, fair play to the top Cougars to really taking it to this team, and it's like, both teams were poor. Both teams weren't great. Top Cougars just took advantage of a lot of the mistakes that Karmine Corp had, and you have to give credit to that if you're an underdog team because you have to execute. But there's also a point where it's like, let's keep it very real. Vatira challenging this ball is stupid. There's no point. If Rise jumps, then you kind of are able to force it, but also he's so limited, you don't have to jump this early. And also, Atao's just not in the play by the time he actually needs to be. And it's a really, really simple execution that they've given up the space too early, that if they were going to challenge this ball, they would have had to jump there. But now, he's already has control of it. It's so easy to just take a beat around you, and you're just screwed. You're just absolutely cooked. Because it's like, ooh, do I go to the space? Do I not? And it's like, you get put in this awful, awful spot. And we'll look here as well where the second man just gets put in no man's land. Again, where they starve each other out on offense, because you'll see Rise's boost management here. Where there's the force. Rise is like 30, right? He backs away. It gives up this space in midfield. Third gets put in this no man land that I talk about a lot, where it's like, do you go? Do you fake? I don't know. And obviously under pressure, it's even worse. and it takes one ball to the back wall. They rotate near post, which starves Rise out, and it leads to a goal. They do end up getting back into this game because of that high pressure offense that we talk about so much, so fair play to that. And when I say fair play to their offense, it's chances like this, like they're in OT, they're able to take the beat, and then this is what happens. You have firepower, super quick execution from Atau, forces the play. Rise trusts what he does. Vatira gets the good touch, and it all comes down to what I say. If their third man gets a good touch, more than likely they score, or they have the quality of breakthrough on a first attack, where they just put them in that awkward a position off their first attack. And fair play. It does work when they're in good form. And I think that needs to be brought up a lot more than it actually is, because a lot of people are just like, oh, well, they're bad. They're not. They're not executing great right now. But they have a very clear idea and game plan. It's just whether or not they execute it. And that's obviously the most terrifying thing of all of when they aren't in form, they don't execute. Something like this on defense where it's just throwing themselves at the ball. They all rotate near post once again. They starve each other out. Let's look at the boost amounts. Rise is the only one with boost. That's not a great sign considering Rise isn't in the play. So you have 12 and 10 boost. Really simple execution. But they're just throwing themselves at the ball. They're not prioritizing having boost management. They're not prioritizing making challenges at the right time. And also, don't get me wrong, like, it's not great, right? Like, people are obviously going to look at this and be like, oh, well, KC should win every time. It is incredibly difficult to be under this amount of pressure, especially with their fan base, to execute. And I said it before, I think they're going to have a much better Worlds than they have this split, where they get a little bit of confidence back. It's a lot easier after you miss a LAN. You either completely implode, or you tend to bounce back really well. And that is what I expect, because it's little things like this, right? Great 50, you're up a goal, you should never get dunked this far back, where your third man Vatira here is just absolutely no man's land, where he's like, where do I go? And Rise constantly gets starved out of second man, and it's not just Rise, it's everyone. Either their second or third is almost always starved, and it all comes from how they rotate. But you see, they all pushed up hyper aggressive because they're expecting one person to get a 50. If that's how it gets a 50 there, they don't concede. And then this is inexcusable in my eyes. They bang it forward, whatever. They look for a demo, and then Rise just fakes and looks for a demo, and it relies on this third man to get a great touch. And thank God, Taku's third man actually did get a great touch, which was Acro, because he put it wide. At least a great touch for KC. And then it all goes wrong again, because they rotate near post again. Because they end up just bumping each other, and I don't know if he gets back. But it's like, they threw it away on just like a terrible play trying to be overly aggressive. And that's kind of the story of their regional. So obviously it was super disappointing for them to miss the regional, but they obviously didn't deserve to be here when they played like this. So let's get into Regional 3 and let's look at some of the things they fixed, because obviously now they are back on a championship Sunday, and they should really be commended for that. So getting into Regional 3, you'll be able to see when I record this, because I'm recording this first of all on Saturday night, where they've just made top 4. Okay, Swiss, right? They beat 3 teams handily that they should, and then they had a poor series against Luna Galaxy where they had a lot of the same issues. But now coming into K Corp versus Oxygen, they were able to get it over the line. And the game I want to look at is Game 6, where I think they had a really good game plan, and they addressed a lot of the issues that I personally complain about. And I don't know if it's what Farah and them were looking at, but I want to show you guys it. So getting into this game, they do end up winning this game. But I want to really look at this attack that they score off. Their second man's a lot more disciplined. They're giving each other space to execute. Probably the only one you don't see as much with is Atau, because even there it's probably quite a poor bounce. But he's able to recover. Even Rise is a little bit more disciplined with how he's sweeping through. Once again, they're sitting so much deeper. Even here, Atau doesn't dive until he's like, oh my god, Archie could miss. Archie misses, whatever. But you see, every single time they were getting this ball, they were picking it up with like 100 boost. And yeah, they are still a little bit more reliant on big boost than the average. But they should be commended when they do it right. And they did it really well this game. And it led to them winning. And you have to applaud that when it is done well. Same thing here. They just let Oski clear. Like, there's no pre-jump here from Rise that we had seen before where they would just try and overdo it. He knows this ball's coming in. Ball bounces into the corner. Well, actually, push this out a little bit. That's my bad. Probably a little bit questionable for Matt's out of turn, but it works. They're able to find this outlet pass. And then this is what happens when you have absolutely star quality players and they're executing as if they are stars. Where it all just comes from they're able to press. And you can see when they do get the press right, Oski's starved out. Yeah, even with full boost, it's so hard to defend someone like Alatau. It's so hard to defend someone like Vatira and his execution. It's so hard to defend someone as shifty and as creative as Rise. And they will just win games. They will always just win games against you. Their defense could probably still have a little bit more to be desired, but obviously they still are winning. And we'll look at the last goal. This is a counterattack. Once again, they're just so much more disciplined in the midfield. They're not trying to overcommit. Even this, they slow it down. They don't overcommit. They're able to keep their boost up. Everyone has boost. And then it just takes one fake where they executed the play perfectly. It's so intelligent to go for the fake here and slow the game down. But more importantly, the reason they have this play is because Rise and Atau have 100. If you give Rise and Atau a free ball with 100 boost, or Vatira, right? You know, pick your name on their team. They're going to make something happen. It's just whether or not they score on first attack. They don't need to score on first attacks. And when they were under this insane pressure and panic, they were trying to score on first attacks. Now, they're able to have discipline, and it's working out really well for them. So we'll go over the rest of the regional in the next part now. Hi guys, so this is the outro of the video. I said I was going to record this obviously a different day after the semifinals, and kind of just what I kind of expected to happen did take place. BDS quite handedly beat K-Corp. They only scored 3 goals in 5 games. Offense didn't really get clicking, which they got away with a little bit against Oxygen, but they were always going to struggle in BDS, in my opinion. BDS's structure is absolutely quality, especially for counter-attacking teams and taking advantage of players in poor form. It didn't really look like any of the players really showed up today and showed their levels either way. And I'm very curious where this K-Corp team goes. I'm going to make a couple early predictions just based on what I've seen, and also I think it's quite important. I've worked with Rise and Vatira before under Team Queso, where we got the finals in Los Angeles. I think this team will bounce back. I have a lot of confidence in Vatira and Rise. Rise is a serial winner. Vatira is a serial winner. I don't know enough about Atau. Ferris obviously a serial winner, and he did it with Vitality. Whether there's any issues in or outside the game, these guys all are incredibly top-level professionals that'll get it over the line. And I think we'll see a top 8 from them at Worlds. I think it's almost going to be an advantage not being at London for them, because they're going to have time to refine their strategy, refine what they want to do, really have a clear head and time to work on what they want to do. And they have so much individual quality that, like, let's be realistic, coming into Worlds, I still don't see a world, right, in my opinion, where they're losing to the APAC and SSA rep, the Middle Eastern 2 seed, the South American 2 seed, the NA4, which in my opinion is probably going to be OG, and honestly SSG, I don't see them losing to them either, and the 2 OCE teams. So there's 8 teams. I think this team will be top 8. I think they could even sneak a top 4, and it really wouldn't be that surprising to me. I don't expect to see this team in Worlds Finals or Finals unless something changes with their playstyle, because the amount of space that we see, especially on counterattacks, especially on LAN, part of what made Gentlemate so good was they were just absolutely lethal on defense, and their counterattacks scored every time pretty much. They didn't give up free goals. This team, it gives up a lot of free goals, as we saw in the replays. I'm curious y'all's thoughts, and let me know down below what you guys did like about this replay review and what other teams you want to see me do, whether it be in this much detail or slightly less. I'm also thinking about doing a kind of preview coming into the major for the teams that are there. So for EU, it would be BDS, Vitality, Oxygen, and Gentlemates Alpine. And thank you guys so much for watching. I know it's a longer video, and if you want to see more, let me know. And if you want your own coaching, metafy.gg, Nick on RL. And make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys so much.